If you're like me, hearing that sends a shiver down your spine. Gears of War is a game that should need no introduction, but if you look around, you'd find almost no one talking about the series. If they are, they're talking about how the series changed too much or how Xbox continues to let their flagship franchises waste away. But I'm not here to talk about all of that. I'm here to take us all the way back to when Gears of War reigned supreme, to before a number was stapled onto the end of the title, and to before they got rid of half the name. In this video, I'll briefly discuss the development history and release of Gears of War. I'll cover the game's story and why it was so unique at the time, and the special piece that I want to cover is the multiplayer and all the awesome times we had playing this game, and all the little details that went into making it such a life-changing experience for myself and for many others. All of the topics in this video will be covered from my perspective of what it was like playing Gears of War from 2006 to 2008. I've watched through all the retrospectives I could find on YouTube, and nearly all of them focus entirely on the campaign. If they do touch on the multiplayer, it's brief and they don't explore the details. It's crazy to me that people could spend so much time talking about how Gears of War was so amazing without really explaining how the multiplayer was the major part of making it such an epic game. So I'm here once again to give a retrospective for the multiplayer parts of games that have gone unmentioned. So let's grow out our soul patches, crack open a bottle of Mountain Dew Game Fuel, and settle down in front of our 480p televisions to talk about why we loved Gears of War. Let's get the history lesson out of the way first. In an effort to beat the PlayStation 3 and Nintendo Wii to market, Microsoft rushed to get the Xbox 360 to store shelves on November 22nd, 2005, an entire year ahead of their competitors. They were positioned perfectly for taking control of the 7th console generation, but to say they cut a few corners to make that happen would be an understatement. One problem with their plan is that they didn't have any really big games to entice customers to upgrade from their existing consoles. People already had extensive libraries of really good games in their hands for the original Xbox and for the PlayStation 2. No one was going to make the switch to the Xbox 360 just to play Cameo or Peter Jackson's King Kong. With the looming threat of the PS3 and Wii right around the corner, Microsoft threw everything they had at the next title from Unreal Tournament's developer, Epic Games. Yes, that Epic Games. In early 2005, in the run-up to the release of the Xbox 360, Epic Games reportedly showed Microsoft executives what their game could look like using the original hardware configuration for the upcoming console. The results were so bad that Microsoft went on to increase the onboard memory from 256 megabytes to a whopping 512 megabytes to allow the console to run Gears of War and future games at 720p. Not that most people had an HD TV at the time anyway, so most games got played in 480p. I didn't even have a 720p television until 2012. This last-minute change to the console hardware is rumored to have cost Microsoft over $1 billion. If Gears of War failed, Xbox would be in deep trouble, kind of like they are now. It's a pretty common misconception that Xbox was leaning on Gears of War to be their next big multiplayer system seller. In reality, multiplayer wasn't even added to Gears of War until the final months before release. In the Making Of documentary, the development team explained that they brought to E3 2006 a tech demo for multiplayer that they had only added 8 days prior. They walked away from the show with the award for best multiplayer game of E3 and had to rush to get the mode fleshed out and added with only 4 months before release. And it shows that they rushed it, but we'll come back to that later. It's hard to imagine where we'd be if Gears of War didn't have multiplayer. The Xbox 360 certainly wouldn't have sold as many consoles as it did in the early years, and the multiplayer gaming industry wouldn't have changed as rapidly as it did. Gears of War was released on November 7th, 2006. 1 million copies were sold within the first 2 weeks, and 3 million copies would be sold within the first 10 weeks. It overtook Halo 2 as the most popular game being played on Xbox Live, a spot Halo 2 had held since its release 2 years prior. So to say that the game was a successful launch and a system seller would be an understatement. Again, it's hard to believe Gears of War didn't have multiplayer until the final months. Now that the history lesson is out of the way, I want to share a little bit of my story. My brother and I, we always loved gaming. He's more of the athlete, I'm more of the artsy-fartsy creative type, obviously, but gaming is where we always bonded. Even now, we sit in Discord at the end of our day and we talk about video games. Growing up, we owned the PS2 and the original Xbox. In our garage, we had a spare TV given to us by a neighbor, and all our friends would come over during the summer and play split screen, usually Halo or Medal of Honor. I'll admit it, I was always the screen peeker. Only a few times did we ever go to a friend's house to do System Link. For you youngins watching, if you wanted to have more than 4 people playing together in those days, you had to connect multiple consoles together with a physical wire. That meant you had to be in the same room or house. Crazy, right? We sold our original Xbox in 2006 to buy the Xbox 360. I'm sure GameStop gave us like $6 toward the upgrade. Our first games on the console were Ace Combat 6, Fires of Liberation, and most of the sports games that were out at the time. In January of 2007, our family was going to be moving across the country, and we were devastated. We wanted to be able to play with our friends after we moved. We had dabbled into playing online using the PlayStation 2. I would play Mortal Kombat Armageddon, and my brother was really into SOCOM 2. So we knew about playing online, and we knew about Xbox Live, and we really wanted it so we could keep playing with our friends. So we convinced our mom that we should be allowed to buy Gears of War, Xbox Live, and a headset. I remember that night pretty well. We had an open house, and buyers were coming to view the house. So we left during a cold, rainy night and drove to the local EB Games to sell our games for store credit. The guys working in the store were pretty hesitant to sell such a violent video game to us, but eventually they gave in and they sold us Gears of War with a wired headset and a card for 12 months of Xbox Live. Before we left, they told us that if we have multiple devices in the house and we want to use internet on them at the same time, we should get this new thing that's called a router. So we went over to Radio Shack and we bought a router, a Linksys WRT54G. And that's the story of how Gears of War and Xbox Live got into our hands. The story and gameplay mechanics for Gears of War are well documented already, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it in this video. I want to touch on some highlights, and I'm also going to give spoilers because this game is 18 years old. If you haven't played it yet or heard the story, that's a you problem. So the story goes like this. Humans are living on an Earth-like planet called Sarah. Deep under the ground, they find a new energy resource called emulsion. Harvesting the emulsion wakes up a dormant alien race that has been living underground called the Locust. One day, the Locust suddenly emerges from underground and devastates human civilization, killing billions within days. This event is known as Emergence Day, or E-Day. The coalition of governments, or COG, wage war to wipe out the Locust and save humanity. To do so, the COG use a space laser called the Hammer of Dawn to destroy most of their own cities and wipe out the Locust forces in the area. 14 years after Emergence Day, you play as Marcus Phoenix, a former COG soldier imprisoned for abandoning his post. His buddy, Dom Santiago, breaks him out of jail and off they go to save the world. Their mission is to find and use a resonator device to map the Locust tunnels. Once mapped, Marcus, Dom, and the rest of Delta Squad must escort a bomb to the detonation target to wipe out the Locust. They succeed, but as they celebrate their victory, the voice of the Locust Queen rings out and suggests that the Locusts are anything but eradicated, setting the stage for the sequels. The story's pretty great. It's nothing special, but it doesn't need to be. It's an action-packed thrill ride about ridiculously muscular space marines fighting even bigger aliens. Even the basic Locust drone is the same size as our heroes. Tonally, the game leans into a gritty horror atmosphere, and it sets the stage that humanity's back is really up against the wall. Everywhere Delta Squad goes is a dark and horrific location. Gameplay-wise, Gears of War revolutionized third-person shooters. By making the characters massive and bringing the camera in close over the shoulder, players get an intimate connection with their character. Characters have weight and they slam into cover like their lives depend on it. Most cover is low cover, meaning it's possible to see or even shoot the enemy if you've got the right angle. And the game is gruesome. Characters don't just fall over when they die, they explode in a pile of blood and gore. Getting hit with a shotgun blast to the chest can send bits and pieces of their torso flying across the screen. And Gears of War has the most iconic weapon in all of gaming, the Lancer assault rifle with its chainsaw bayonet. An absolutely impractical weapon, but it's so over the top that it's a constant reminder to suspend your disbelief and just enjoy things being awesome. That's the great thing about video games. They're supposed to be ridiculous and fun and not be confined by what's possible in the real world. When you use the Lancer's chainsaw, the screen whips to a cinematic angle, the characters scream with intensity, and blood flies everywhere as it rips through their chest.
That's metal in your lungs.
And I almost forgot about the active reload. It's just so iconic and burned into my brain that I almost forgot about it. In most games, reloading is just a small bit of downtime during the battle that leaves you exposed. But in Gears of War, they turned reloading into a little minigame. If you time a second press of your reload button just right, you'll reload much faster and get extra damage for the rounds reloaded. Fail and your gun jams, leaving you vulnerable for up to 5 seconds. The main cast are all beefy, chonky space marines. Delta Squad consists of Marcus Phoenix, Dom Santiago, the smarmy, wisecracking Baird, and former Thrashball superstar Augustus Cole. Whoa! They are supported by Anya Stroud, the voice in comms telling them where to go and what to do, and they are led by Colonel Hoffman, a gruff, no-nonsense leader. Early on, 2 other members of Delta Squad are killed off during the first act of the game. There's Carmine, who gets picked off by a sniper while trying to reload, and Lieutenant Min Kim. In the sequels, they added additional brothers for the Carmine family to give some background and provide a running joke that the Carmine family all meet tragic ends. For Gears of War 3, they actually ran a campaign to let players choose if the Carmine in the game would live or die. You could cast your vote by purchasing a t-shirt for your Xbox Live avatar with either Save Carmine or Carmine Must Die. In the end, players chose to save Clayton Carmine, but there's an Easter egg in the game showing him dying when a toaster falls into his bathtub. Lieutenant Kim? Yeah, he has no character. He's only a soldier that shows up, leads you, and then gets killed by the Locust General. There are different types of Locusts that appear. There are the drones, snipers, and grenadiers, and you can tell them apart by their clothing options. The Locust's elite troops are known as the Theron. The Locust Force is led by General Ram, a late addition to the game. In the original game, General Ram has no backstory, no character traits, and he's just a big badass Locust. And that's all he needed to be. I've seen complaints from people that General Ram is boring and he doesn't make sense when he shows up, but I think this is where Gears of War shines. You don't need to know how he became a general, what he's trying to do, what his motivations are. It's pretty clear from the first moment you see him. He's an unmatched threat, your conventional weapons aren't enough, and he's here to kill you. He's a foreboding presence that constantly reminds you that the Locusts are just stronger and better than you. One of the best parts about Gears of War is that the entire campaign is playable in co-op. Most games have co-op for the story mode, but what set Gears of War apart is that the second player takes control of Dom. It wasn't too common before Gears of War for the second player's character to also be a central part of the story. There are certain sections throughout the campaign where you're forced to split up and take alternate paths, and every time this happens, there's a sequence where you need to help each other out, either by providing suppressing fire or by clearing a path for the other. It really is you and a buddy working together to defeat the Locust, just like Marcus and Dom are doing in the game. And the game is fucking difficult on higher difficulty. I haven't played Gears of War on insane difficulty in over a decade, but one sequence is particularly burned into my brain for how frustratingly difficult it is. As Delta Squad is looking to activate the resonator underground, they must make their way through a factory to reach the pumping station and descend into the tunnels. During this mission, they crank up the horror elements by having multiple jump scares, and there are bloodied, gory bodies strewn all about. On top of this, a new enemy type is introduced, a lambent version of the wretches previously seen. Over the comms, Anya explains that these wretches must have had direct exposure to emulsion, causing them to explode when they are killed. So here you are, going through tight corridors with enemies who want nothing more than to take a thick chomp out of Marcus's Phoenix, and they explode once you kill them. And then, to make matters worse, there's a section where you have to climb into minecarts and ride the rails to your destination. For this entire sequence, you're locked motionless in a minecart, and there are wretches climbing on the ceiling. When you kill a wretch on the ceiling, its corpse will fall and then explode. There's just barely enough time for you to kill each of them without the corpse falling into the cart and killing you. And if you or Dom dies, you have to restart the entire sequence from the beginning. That entire sequence is one that just makes you want to throw your controller. It's right up there as one of the most frustrating missions you have to repeat over and over again.
All we had to do was follow the damn train, CJ.
Gears of War would be nothing without its multiplayer. I often hear this being said in retrospectives and lookbacks at the game, but for some reason, no one seems to want to go into much detail about it. It's become a passion of mine now to make sure that multiplayer experiences are well documented. This goes beyond just saying what game modes and maps were available or what weapons are in the game. No, instead, I want to really dive into all the ways we played the game and all the ways it brought us together and tore us apart. So let's take a look at why we loved Gears of War's multiplayer.
This is where the fun begins.
As I've already mentioned, multiplayer was a last-minute addition to Gears of War. The team at Epic only had one map available to show off at E3 6 months before the game was set to release. The map was an early version of what would eventually become Gridlock, and it was thrown together 8 days before E3. After being surprised by winning the award for Best Multiplayer Game of E3 2006, the team rushed to flesh out and polish the mode. It's amazing that they accomplished what they did in less than 5 months, but due to the rush, there are some pretty big issues that are still present to this day. The main issue that most of us will remember is that the host of the session always has an advantage. Because of how the multiplayer was implemented, everyone other than the host was subject to fairly imperceptible lag. The small amount of lag that did exist gave a ton of power to the host. This resulted in the host having what appeared to be more damage because there was no latency in their Xbox registering the shots. A host with an active reload on their Lancer could down you in only a handful of shots because the bullets would register accurately and quickly on their end, and the latency made it seem like they had only fired a few shots on your end. Running 1v1 against the host with an active reloaded shotgun usually ended in disaster.
What are you doing?
Making a mistake.
Making a mistake.
The matches play out in 4v4 with one team playing as the Cog and the other team playing as the Locust. Before the match starts, each player gets to choose their character that they want to play as. For the Cog, the options are the main cast. You got Marcus, Dom, Baird, Cole, Kim, Carmine, and Hoffman. This was one of the best decisions that they made for the game. Being able to play as the characters from the main story made you feel like you were more connected to them, and it also meant that their personalities were constantly present in our minds, making us way more excited for the eventual sequels that would continue the story of these characters. For the Locust, the options are the Drone, the Sniper, the Grenadier, Grenadier Elite, Gunner, the Theron Guards, and a scaled-down version of General Ram. But General Ram and the Therons have these flowing capes, and it always felt like their hitboxes were a little larger as a result. I think the most common choice was the Grenadier. You're just so badass, you don't need armor. Gears of War made a big change to the multiplayer format by choosing not to include a traditional team deathmatch mode. Instead, the team at Epic chose to create game modes that are round-based, and each player only gets one life for the round. Regardless of the game mode, the most popular weapon was and still is the Gnasher shotgun. A well-timed and well-aimed shot with the Gnasher could make an enemy explode into a pile of guts. If you only hit them in the legs, you could also down them. Fights usually devolve into wall bouncing and blind firing shotguns at each other. There's also a technique called pop shotting, where you quickly aim the shotgun and fire to cause the model to angle upward and spray the rounds from a low angle. But the most popular technique, and the one that sent me into a spiral when a buddy reminded me of it, is called the two-piece. Two-piecing someone means you hit them with a melee attack to briefly stun them, and then you blast them with a shotgun. When timed and aimed correctly, it's a guaranteed kill. In the original game, getting hit while sprinting wouldn't slow you down, so people would just straight up sprint right at you and two-piece you if you weren't quick enough to kill them. Getting two-pieced is the perfect catalyst for breaking your controller. Once everyone on a team is eliminated, there are a few brief seconds where the voice chat opens up and both teams just talk mad shit before the next round starts. There was nothing quite like the shit talking that went on in Gears of War. This is early on in the Xbox Live days. The service had 1 million subscribers in July of 2004, 2 million subscribers in July of 2005 thanks to Halo 2, and at E3 in June of 2007, 6 months after the release of Gears of War, Xbox announced that they had over 7 million subscribers. I can remember signing up for Xbox Live, hopping into some matches, and being called out for being a squeaky-voiced kid. Talking with strangers online was a pretty new experience for most people, and to have it in such a competitive game meant that the shit talking was constant and legendary.
I live in North Carolina, so I hope you live close so I can your sister.
Before I talk about the uber competitive stuff in ranked matches, I want to first talk about the more casual stuff that went on in player matches. I spent most of my time playing player matches instead of ranked matches. Ranked always seemed a bit too tryhard for me. Even to this day, in most games, I choose not to play ranked because it just brings out the worst in people. I'm looking at you, League of Legends. There was plenty of fun to be had in player matches, letting the map cycle and switching up teams every few rounds. Player matches bred all sorts of game modes, but the one that really stands out in my memory was sniper battles. In this community-made game mode, every weapon on the map is replaced with a sniper rifle. The goal is to kill all of the enemy team using only headshots. Active reloads were off limits because in the first game, if you hit an enemy in the body with an active reload shot from the long shot, it was an instant down. The extra twist on the formula is that you weren't allowed to aim down your sights to get your kill. Only blind fires were allowed, and in some cases, quick scopes as well. My brother used to play sniper battles for hours on end, and it used to drive me up the fucking wall sitting there watching him play. I even remember one time where he took a piece of electrical tape and stuck it to the center of the screen so he could train his eye on where the blind fire shots were aimed at. Watching him play sniper battles on canals and spending hours and hours doing pop shots and blind fires hoping for a headshot is drilled into my brain, and it's a traumatic experience. But sniper battles also led to one of the greatest pieces of entertainment to ever come from a gaming community: sniper montages. Dude, even just watching these while editing is getting me all excited. Sniper montages were wild. They are just a never-ending stream of really awesome headshots with that ridiculously satisfying headshot sound effect. Sniper montages were always set to some popular song at the time. Remember, this is in the pre-Google YouTube era. People weren't making money off of YouTube. They just made videos for others to enjoy, and copyright claims weren't a thing. I'm obviously not going to play any of the sound from these montages here, but I swear about half of them out there were set to Bodies by Drowning Pool or a Papa Roach song. My brother and I used to sit in front of the computer for hours and hours watching montages on YouTube and trying to recreate what we saw in-game. Names that come to mind are Chaos, Shadow Punisher, Nizmojo, and Mob O Insane O. And as I was researching for this part of the video, I discovered that Mob Insane is actually Moist Critical. Yeah, I just blew my own f***ing mind. Moist Critical's first ever video for YouTube was uploaded in August of 2007 when he was in 6th grade, and it was a Gears of War sniper montage set to Bodies by Drowning Pool.
Then I watched Nizmojo's sniper montage on this game and started making YouTube videos. God bless.
I'm sure there are a ton of really awesome players and montages out there, and I tried to go through and find all the names I could recall, but if you can think of any that I didn't mention, leave a comment below. If you're enjoying this video and you want more absolute nostalgia bombs like this, subscribe to the channel and click the bell to be notified when new retrospectives are released. There are a ton of glitches in Gears of War. You could chainsaw yourself to make blood spray from your character. You could also make yourself turn invisible. Next, we have the sliding curb stomp. This one was just for BM and for taunting your downed opponents, since you were effectively canceling the curb stomp. Then we come to the ones that were just full on abused and gave you advantages, like the insta chainsaw glitch. All you gotta do is touch the enemy and they'll explode immediately and you won't be stuck in your vulnerable chainsaw animation. And the one that everyone would do was the weapon slide. Picking up a weapon usually left you in a vulnerable position, but with the weapon slide, you could pick up a weapon and slide around to avoid enemy fire. You could do the slide to slide straight into cover, or you could do it while already on cover, or you could just do it to slide around freely. There was also this glitch that was used to make your character hover, and it was called the Kung Fu Flip. This one was used to reach advantageous spots that weren't intended for players to be in. It was really abused to gain advantages in matches, but this was also one of the main glitches used for getting out of the maps to explore the untextured space. There were so many times where we would just hop into matches with no intention of fighting, and we'd just spend hours getting out of the maps and exploring. There was also this really cool glitch called the skydive that was used to get out of maps. Your character would get launched to the top of the skybox and then start falling. While falling, you'd aim to make sure your character landed on a particular spot so that you'd be able to further explore the untextured space. But the most abused and popular glitch of all is the Crabwalk. For this glitch, the abuser would appear to be in a running animation and moving at running speed on their opponent's screens, but in reality, they were walking around at increased speed and had full control to aim and fire. It was incredibly annoying to fight against because the enemy is so hard to hit. It was also a pretty easy glitch to do. Before a patch made it more difficult, all you had to do was pull away from a wall right as your character was transitioning between two spots of cover. After the patch, you also needed to time a press of the B button. There's one other glitch I want to mention that's mostly just a relic of that era. Modems back in the day had a button labeled standby on them that would temporarily pause all network traffic. If the host pushed the standby button, all other players in the game would lag with every character just running in a straight line. But on the host's end, they would have free reign to run around and kill other players. Then they would push the button again to end standby mode. Once standby mode ended, the version of the game on the host's machine would sync to the other players' consoles, and anyone that had died on the host's machine would just explode immediately. If the host waited too long to exit standby mode, their Xbox 360 would detect that they had lost connection to Xbox Live and it would end the session. So it was about a 50-50 if someone would do it correctly when they tried. Most people refer to this as a lag switch, but I remember the standby button being the term coined far before the lag switch. Gears of War was at the forefront of the competitive shooter scene. Ranked matches were a separate menu option with their own leaderboards. I didn't do too many of these, so I'll only share the things I can remember. All the sweaty competitive people played Warzone. If you played Execution, you were a scrub like me. One thing I definitely remember from ranked Warzone is that people were more willing to sit back with lancers or pistols with active reloads and just gun you down if you left cover. Matches were a little bit slower and there were fewer shotgun duels. Unless you were playing on Raven Down. That map was always a bloodbath. I can remember after we moved across the country, I hopped online to play some matches with my friend back home and his stepdad. All of the matches were on Raven Down, and almost all of them ended in me being absolutely useless for my team. One thing that I've been really interested in as I look back through multiplayer games is just how the community developed their own set of rules. In Gears of War, there was the sniper battles, as I previously mentioned, but one of the unwritten rules was the request for a 1v1. When both teams are down to their last member, someone will usually try to request a straight up 1v1 by meleeing the air and shooting their pistol at the sky. This is the signal that they just want to get right to a shotgun battle out in open space and skip all the hiding behind cover. If the enemy agrees, they'll square off into a wall bouncing and pop shotting match, or they would decline and just shoot the other person while they were exposed to win the match. But ranked matches were only the start of the competitive scene. At the time, Major League Gaming was just starting to take off. This is right at the start of the esports scene. The first major tournament to feature Gears of War was held in Las Vegas in 2007, with the winners being Infinity, who walked away with $25,000. That's a lot of money in 2007. MLG was everywhere, and everyone acted like they were the cool MLG kids. People would start up their own teams or clans and all change their gamer tags to include the clan tag at the start of their name. I can remember starting one with my friends when I was like 13. We called ourselves the Knights of Destruction and went by KOD. My gamer tag was XKODX Assassin. Yeah, super edgy. Beyond the actual professional scene, MLG also had a website to allow for amateur and semi-pro competition among teams. It all took place through the Game Battles website. Unfortunately, Game Battles was recently acquired by Activision and then shut down, but thankfully, the Wayback Machine has archived versions of the website, so I was able to go and grab some screenshots. For the uninitiated, the way Game Battles worked is that it let you sign up a team to compete in seasonal ladders. If you didn't have a team, you could also sign up as a free agent to be found by a team. When your team was ready for a match, you could go into the match finder and post that you were ready, or you could go and you could find someone who already had a post and message them using AIM. AOL's Instant Messenger. Now there's a throwback. There were additional rules for the matches, and unfortunately, the Wayback Machine doesn't have an archive of those, but I do remember that if you did the weapon slide, it was an immediate forfeit. There was sort of an honor system that you would correctly report the results, but it was rife with teams abusing the system and reporting that they'd won when they hadn't. To resolve the dispute, you needed to have evidence that your team did win the match. Now remember, this is long before Twitch or live streaming was a thing, so capture cards just weren't something many people had. In fact, the most popular capture card at the time was the Dazzle HD video recorder. This thing didn't even have HDMI. I can remember my brother and I really wanting to get a Dazzle for years. And bro, I know you're listening, but there is no fucking world in which you would have sat in front of a computer long enough to edit your own montage. Since no one on my team had a Dazzle, I would break out the webcam, place it on a bedside table, and record up at the screen. It was super jank. Now, I'm not even gonna try to act like I have a moral leg to stand on. I submitted so many false match results, and once I even got banned from a ladder because I edited the footage to cut together different clips and make it look like we had won. In August of 2015, a remastered version of Gears of War was released for the PC and Xbox One. Dubbed Gears of War Ultimate Edition, it retained a lot of the original game's mechanics and charm, but with a facelift and some quality of life improvements. While writing this video essay, I played through the Ultimate Edition for the first time. It had been over a decade since I played any Gears of War game. The Ultimate Edition doesn't make it any better. For one, they added omnidirectional evading, so you could dive in more directions than just the 4 cardinal directions. This change isn't that big a deal, and I quickly turned it off in the settings. They also changed the multiplayer scoreboards to remove any sense of personality and instead replaced it with this absolutely bland scoreboard. And also they added in weapon skins for the starting weapons. Now I know a lot of people really like weapon skins and having the ability to have some personalization and customization, but it's all just neon and corporate and it doesn't fit with the game's theme. I don't know, maybe I'm just too old for this shit. The Ultimate Edition also adds in additional chapters to the campaign that were missing from the original release but were included in the PC port that was released shortly after the Xbox 360 version. The extra chapters are supposed to add a little bit more explanation for how Delta Squad gets to the train for the final sequence, but it just includes this strangely slapstick cat and mouse chase with the Brumac. In the original Xbox 360 version, there is no fight against the Brumac, and again, it's perfect that way because the Locusts are monsters that you should be afraid of. You don't need a battle against a giant big bad enemy to take away that fear element that you've instilled. Now I know I didn't talk about the sequels in this video essay, but that's because they just didn't have as great made an impact on me. Sure, they are great games, and I really enjoyed playing them when they came out, especially the Horde modes, but they weren't as perfect in their imperfections as the original Gears of War. I recently made a trip to my local GameStop and was able to snag the entire trilogy for my Xbox 360. I'm really looking forward to playing them again and reliving some memories. I haven't played any of the games that came out after the trilogy ended, so I'm really looking forward to playing those as well. If you're interested in seeing my take on the other games in the series and how they improved on the formula, please subscribe and let me know in the comments below. Gears of War as a series has fallen on some really hard times since Xbox acquired the rights to the IP and handed it over to their newly created development team, the Coalition. Gears of War may have pioneered the push for Xbox Live and third-person cover-based shooters, but it failed to evolve the formula and fell behind its competitors. Unfortunately, it's not the only franchise under Xbox to have met the same fate. Gears of War was a truly life-changing game. Those crazy bastards over at Epic Games really made something that deserves to be in a museum for its importance in the history of gaming. They were able to take a brand new IP in a brand new engine and make it a household name while also setting the new standard for cinematic storytelling, graphics, and multiplayer. It wasn't just the campaign and the story that we fell in love with, but it was also what it did for multiplayer gaming. It was a major system seller, and it brought so many of us to online gaming and allowed us to be connected in one shared experience. It brought us together far more than it tore us apart. It had a lasting impact not only on the gaming industry, but also on many people's lives. And that, my friends, is why we loved Gears of War.